Assalamu alaikum, I'm Carl Arrindell and you're watching In Focus. Now, as we read reports this week of the deaths of one of the leading Muslim Brotherhood figures and former Freedom and Justice Party MP, Farid Ismail, while in jail in Egypt, I'm pleased to be joined today by senior Brotherhood member Dr. Gamal Heshmat, who has made time to speak to me during his very tight lecture visit to the UK. Now, Dr. Gamal Heshmat is a senior member of the Brotherhood's Shura Council. He's a leading member of the Freedom and Justice Party, and he's also regarded as the head of the Egyptian Parliament in exile. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Heshmat, and welcome to In Focus.
Thank you.
Now, we've been reading of the shocking conditions experienced by over 40,000, but I gather closer to 250,000 detainees in the Egyptian prisons since the overthrow of. How much of a shock was it to you to learn of Farid Ismail's death this week, and exactly how bad are the conditions in the jails?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
The execution conditions are just one of many methods used to kill Egyptians during the time of their military coup. They are killed by shooting, in the street, or through the judgments of the judiciary. It is a judicial farce. If we looked through the judgments issued during the first quarter of the year 2015, we would find the following. There are 3,696 cases of dictatorial arrests, 2,894 cases of torture while in custody in jails. These are the registered figures posted in Jan, February and March 2015. There are 617 cases of enforced disappearance. There are 255 recognized recorded cases of unlawful killing, of which the Egyptian judiciary have examined just 148. This figure has increased today to 149 cases following the pronouncements in respect of the president. Of the total number of individuals sentenced, which amounts to 2,381 persons, 197 of them have been sentenced to be executed. 1,081 individuals have between them been sentenced to a total of 11,660 years. The total of so-called collaterals is 1,478,000. The total of fines imposed by the judiciary is 48 million. The judiciary is now an arm of the military coup, so we shouldn't be surprised by the continuation of these excessive judgments. Sentences of execution or life sentences given to innocents whose guilt has not been confirmed by any other than the investigations of the state security, which hates and is violently opposed to those people since the time of the Mubarak regime and since establishment of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Now, last year, as the Muslim Brotherhood faced the prospect of a ban here in Britain, following an investigation that was announced into apparent links to violent extremism by the UK Prime Minister David Cameron, a press release from the Muslim Brotherhood suggested that such a ban would only serve to increase the risk of terrorism and would alienate moderate Muslims. Can you explain the reasoning behind this assessment, and what, in your understanding, were the forces that led to the opening of such an investigation in the first place, which incidentally has not yet been published?
I think that opening investigations in London regarding Muslim Brotherhood group are directly linked to the UK's financial interests with the Gulf. There have been huge economic pressures imposed on London with a strong desire to confirm Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist group in order to be in line with those regimes which have promoted the idea and who support the notion that the group is a terrorist group. Therefore, I will show you here a secret report from the Department of the International Counter-Terrorism in the Foreign Office. I'll read one paragraph in order to provide some understanding of the significance of the delay in declaring the results. The report says, it's clear that the results of the British analysis regarding the Muslim Brotherhood group depend on evaluating the group as a secret group which pursues violence and has regional and international connections via via an international network. However, despite the failure to publish the report, all the indicators show that the report will not consider the Muslim Brotherhood group as a terrorist group for a whole variety of reasons and considerations. Some of them are related to the interior political dynamics within Britain, which are also related to its relations with Muslim countries, along with other regional considerations connected to Britain's relationship with and dialogue with various strands of political Islam that give it a legitimate presence. Besides these issues, the evidence connecting the Muslim Brotherhood to terrorism is very weak, especially from a British judicial perspective. This point is particularly serious because if the results of such investigations become public, that will seriously undermine the evidence which has framed the Egyptian political attitude and which has determined the Muslim Brotherhood to be a terrorist group. This will raise significant questions about the integrity of the Egyptian judicial process and its classification and judgments in respect of the Brotherhood. There can be no doubt that the group will use this contrast of the Egyptian and British attitudes in order to gain more international support to their position. It's clear that the investigations will extend for more and more time in accordance with changing political dynamics and priorities, and this may even eventually lead to a re-evaluation of the report and its recommendations. The opening of the investigation has, however, provided us with the opportunity to interact with the British side and potentially to have an impact on the investigation results. We fully recognize that this investigation is a tool through which Egypt and the Gulf states with their money are able to impose pressures on the British government to come up with results which protect their interests. I think that it is to distort the reputation of Dr. Mohammed Morsi and to sentence him with a harsh sentence as an extension of the coup against him. The president is sentenced on 7 counts. The last one occurred after sentencing him to 20 years imprisonment in order to ensure that he could not be free at the end of the judgment. They fabricated an issue, what they termed an incitement of Rabaa sit-in. President Morsi does not recognize these courts and does not accept that they have an authority over him. Because he is the legitimate president, and any judgments against him must be in accordance with the Egyptian constitution that the Egyptian people have approved. This did not occur. So he doesn't recognize the courts and its judgments, whether judgments issued in the past, today, or in future.
In the last fortnight, Dr. Mohammed Morsi, the ousted Egyptian president, was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment alongside 14 of his co-defendants on charges of violence and inciting violence for the torture of protesters outside the presidential palace in December 2012. They were all acquitted of murder in the deaths of protesters. You have said, and I'm quoting, or it has been said, innocent young people are being executed while corrupt senior officials who ruined the country are being freed. What do you see as the significance of these verdicts being
The attitude of the international community towards the Egyptian judiciary should be unanimous and conclusive, that its judiciary doesn't hold to international justice standards. It doesn't hear from lawyers and defense witnesses, that its process is founded on prejudice and unfairness. The Minister of Justice has controversially formed 6 different bodies to deal with counter-terrorism or to judge terrorism in Egypt. So far, there are as many as 255 prisoners killed inside the prisons as a result of bad treatment, interrogations or medical negligence, as this is the case with Dr. Farid Ismail, the parliamentary member and one of the key participants in the establishment of the Egyptian constitution. He is a hugely respected figure, as was seen by the turnout at his funeral. Dr. Farid's death is a scream in the face of the world to urge it to resist this brutal regime which promotes state terrorism in Egypt. Sisi doesn't fight terrorism in Egypt, he promotes terrorism in Egypt. This is an important message. Justice no longer exists in Egypt and the Egyptian judiciary has collapsed. There are important facts that are demonstrated by those judgments.
أو اللي صدرت اليوم أو اللي ستصدر بعد كده في الخمس قضايا الأخرى.
Now, earlier this month, we received news that the newspaper said, senior Muslim Brotherhood figure Mohammed Badi and 13 others were sentenced to death by an Egyptian court for conspiring against the state. They were to be hanged for plotting attacks by inciting chaos and violence, the judge said in the verdict, which was televised across the nation. The sentences were given after the judiciary consulted the Egyptians' ultimate Islamic authority, the Grand Mufti. Even the military coup in 2013, ever since the military coup in 2013, hundreds of Brotherhood supporters have been given death sentences. Have any of these actually been carried out? And is there a likelihood that they will be, or do you think they'll all be subject to appeal?
هو الموقف من القضاء المصري الحقيقة يجب أن يكون موقفا حاسما من المجتمع الدولي. هذا قضاء لا
I think that those sentences send a clear message that the judiciary is in control of the dispute and the demonstrations. In one court session, judgments were issued pronouncing execution sentences against 672 individuals. Other sessions pronounced execution orders in respect of 528 persons. These judgments are aimed at all revolutionaries and all Egyptian people, those who defend their revolution, who refuse injustice and dictatorship. They will be suppressed by brutal means, killing by shooting or through the issuing of harsh sentences. Yes, it's a revenge of the revolution. It's a revenge of the revolutionaries. It's a failure to manage the political affairs in Egypt by the coup regime. All these are facts. The coup regime is leading Egypt towards a failing state on all political, economical, social and security levels.
لأنه لا تتوفر فرص العدالة ولا فرص الدفاع عن النفس أمام المتهمين.
Now, in the last fortnight, you've also had the Egyptian court sentencing 71 protesters to life imprisonment for their apparent role in setting fire to a building described as a Christian church, although I gather that this is in dispute. 51 of those sentenced were in absentia, 21 already in prison. Yahya Ahmed, the former minister of Morsi's government, now living in exile in Istanbul, referred to the response that was given by Amnesty International, who described it as a travesty of justice, a day of tragedy for democracy. He said they are trying to sentence the whole Arab Spring in the form of Dr. Morsi to imprisonment for 20 years. He said, we do not recognize this court. It's a pure coup d'etat. Is that how you see it?
أنا أعتقد أن الأحكام القضائية وأن التصرف والتعلل بأن القضاء.
The security status is very bad now in Egypt. As I have said, the security body is busy in suppressing revolutionaries and breaking up the demonstrations. As for prosecuting real criminal offences and providing an environment where its citizens can live safely, they are not available at all. The thugs who are used by the security bodies cause terror against the population without fear of prosecution, while the innocent citizens are taken to prisons, removed from their houses, their jobs and the streets, and are then prosecuted for fabricated crimes and subject to unjust sentencing. There is a madness status in Egypt under this military coup.
Now, satirists, internationally renowned satirist Bassem Youssef and columnist Belal Fadl were among the most prominent media figures to have been targeted, apparently, both of whom have since left Egypt and are denied a platform in the domestic media. Sherif Mansour, a Middle East and North Africa coordinator of the Committee to Protect Journalists, described the situation currently in Egypt as, and I'm quoting him, worse than it has ever been, worse than the era of Hosni Mubarak, worse than, he said, Morsi's period, in which he said authorities go after anyone with a political opinion that is independent from the government's line. Is that an assessment that you agree with?
In fact, the military coup has started to turn against its own supporters. The coup is unrelenting in its confrontation of anybody who speaks or protests against it. At one time, many supported 30th of June and the deposition of Dr. Morsi. Now they confess that this era. At one time, many supported 30th of June and the deposition of Dr. Morsi. Now they confess that this era, post-Morsi, is worse than the Mubarak era. Mubarak didn't make any decision without referring to the security body, but now it is an intelligence and security-led state. The military intelligence manages the state now, the media, political and economic affairs, and also the large national state projects. They compete directly with the Egyptian businessmen. The head of the Egyptian regime believes in himself only, so anybody who opposes him must be harshly and promptly excluded. This was the case with Abdel Nasser in 1952, when he killed all persons opposed to him. In spite of the fact that they gave him popular legitimacy, he placed senior members of the Muslim Brotherhood in jail. This is also the case with Muhammad Najib, who gave Nasser an official legitimacy but was placed under house arrest for 20 years. Even Abdul Razzaq al-Samhuri, who was central to providing such legitimacy, found himself pelted by shoes inside the State Council Assembly. The soldiers are traitors. Once they have betrayed, they may betray forever. They don't have political vision and they are prepared to use violence. Sisi has openly admitted that the military body is a kill machine, although he doesn't use it now against the country's strategic enemies, but against the Egyptian people. That is the worst development from the military coup.
فيهم خيانة إذا خانوا مرة يخونوا على طول باستمرار.
Now, the Egyptian Revolutionary Council, which is based in Istanbul, warned just last week that the coup authorities of Egypt will be held responsible for what they described as the dangerous and probable consequences of what it refers to as the politicised judiciary's issuing of any further unjust sentences against the revolutionaries. Dr. Maher Azam, who's the head of the ERC, called upon the international community, and I quote, to bear witness and take up its moral responsibility in responding to the deteriorating human rights condition in Egypt under the military coup authorities before the situation in Egypt reaches boiling point, she said. What are these dangerous and probable consequences that she's referring to, and do you think it probable that the international community will actually heed her call?
The international community lives a schizophrenic life. If we talk about human rights of their people, the international community will defend them and talk about them. It uses the human rights as a weapon according to its own interests. What happened in Egypt when 4,000 victims were killed in 12 hours, and then nobody spoke about that. Even these days, the killing is widespread everywhere in Egypt, such as Basarta village that was besieged for 3 days, and 4 youth were killed there and subject to fabricated accusations. Yet there was no international condemnation. However, when 20 persons were killed in Ukraine, all the world expressed its horror. So what about